double the dough. Hey, Roger Nyaman, do it dough. Yeah, double the. Hey, double the dough.
Okay, welcome to the Gray Area Talk. This week, I have one of the prominent Zimbabwean politicians you have seen here, mostly in the media circles. President Linda Masarira of the Lead Party. I don't know what Lead means. You explain to us, but welcome, President.
Thank you so much. LEAD stands for Labour, Economists, and African Democrats.
Okay, well, and today is International Day of Democracy. What a coincidence.
You can say that again.
Okay, okay, so the reason why we have here today is I called this gray area because we wanted to talk about some of the areas that are a little bit gray to the Zimbabwean people. And recently I came across one of your most detailed posts, which was talking about the fight against genetically modified organisms, the GMOs, and you have been putting up a fight against these things. So my first question was like, what is this whole thing about where you are going out and you're saying people should not take GMOs?
I didn't get your question, Alec.
Okay, our question is, I wanted to know what is this whole fight that you are putting on about and why?
Okay. First and foremost, I think the people of Zimbabwe should understand that GMOs are not legal in Zimbabwe. GMO means genetically modified organisms that are added into maybe seeds, foodstuffs, etc. And we've noticed that in Zimbabwe, a lot of food producers have been actually adding GMOs into the meats that we're consuming, into the milling meal. And recently, last year, the Minister of Agriculture actually allowed importation, was it Minister of Agriculture or the Cabinet, importation of GMO seeds, which is actually a contradiction of the laws that are already in existence, which do not allow consumption of genetically modified foods. So when we look at it, GMOs also cause high cancer rates. They cause cancer and other diseases that are known. And when you look at the statistics globally, Zimbabwe is one of the countries that has got high cancer rates right now. And we also look at the state of our health institutions and the state of the economy. Most people are not even able to afford to go and get treated for cancer. They're not even able to go to attend a proper hospital to get treated. So what is important is the government of this country should actually make sure that every Zimbabwean is protected from these harmful foods that cause cancers and other diseases that we do not know about. So what we've been saying is, let the law take its course and let us not allow those who are in business to manipulate the consumers in Zimbabwe by giving them harmful foodstuffs. Beyond the GMOs themselves, there's a herbicide called glyphosate, which was also present in the milling meal that Rutendo Ben Matinyarare took to a laboratory to get tested so that we would see what we are consuming. Thirdly, we've got Z Chronocos, the owner of Simbisa Brands, Insco, etc., who is practically owning the whole food industry in Zimbabwe. He owns Qualcomm, he owns Insco, he owns Texas Butchery, you name it. It is not advisable for any one country to have food production in the hands of one individual. It is actually a cause of concern and a food security threat. Yes, we appreciate the fact that Z Krudokos and his companies and other shareholders are creating employment opportunities for the people of Zimbabwe. But what we do not appreciate is the monopoly. And how did we get here? Why did the government of Zimbabwe leave the situation get to such a stage where we've got one big player holding the food industry and who can do anything at any time? We also have challenges from people like Bill Gates, who have always had a depopulation agenda of depopulating Africa. And we know that these people, they are not black people, and they can get manipulated as well by their white community. It's as at the flick of a finger, just one poisonous thing in our food and they're all gone. So these are things that we should also think about. What are we consuming? What are we eating? Is it healthy for us? Thank you.
Okay, well, that is well detailed. Okay, thank you so much for this detailed answer. I'm seeing that it's touching a lot of politics, but I want to go back to the studies again. I think there is the Kenneth Griffin Harvard study that says that they tested 3 generations of mice on GMO corn for 3 years and concluded that they were not affected. Their lifespan was okay and everything was fine. So what is your counter argument to this Harvard study? Do we have another empirical study that we can present as a counter study to these results?
You know, what always makes me laugh is we always want to have studies on mice, but are human beings mice? No, we are not mice. We are human beings. While the two, what did I want to say? All right, all the Harvard study on mice may suggest no immediate harmful effects. There are counter arguments to consider. Mice are not human beings, and results on animals do not always translate directly to human health outcomes. Long-term studies on human beings are still limited, and some concerns revolve around potential long-term ecological impacts, biodiversity loss, and the buildup of herbicides and pesticides used in conjunction with GMO crops, which may affect soil health and ecosystems. The glyphosate that I talked about earlier on, when I was saying we also have herbicides like glyphosate, which are affecting our soil and the ecosystem, and which are very harmful if they're consumed by human beings. The study may not take into account indirect effects such as the health impacts of consuming foods exposed to higher levels of herbicides like glyphosate, commonly used with GMO foods. So that is the biggest challenge that we have. That glyphosate, which has been banned in more than 99 countries, is being allowed to be used in Zimbabwe to plant GMO seeds, thereby also affecting the quality of our soil and the quality of the food that we consume and affecting our health. And then you also take into consideration that in other countries, I'll give an example of South Africa just next door, they scan products for GMOs. In Zimbabwe, they're not scanning products for GMOs. We do not even have food products labeled whether they contain GMOs or not, because it should be my choice as a consumer to eat the contaminated food with GMOs or not to eat it. But what we have is we do not have a choice, and many countries have laws requiring the scanning and labeling of products to indicate whether they contain GMOs. Zimbabwe currently does not have a mandatory law specifically for scanning products for GMO identification. And that is all that we're asking from the government of Zimbabwe. Can we have our food scanned? Can we know that this is containing GMOs so that I can make a choice on whether or not I want to consume that? The country does, however, have regulation that prohibits the importation of GMOs under the Zimbabwe National Biotechnology Authority. And any decisions are based on rigorous scientific assessments. However, there are plenty of gaps in terms of enforcement and product labeling, and thus we do not know what we country.
Okay. Just to get to that question also, I was brought to a Herald article that was, I think, in March, when the Minister of Agriculture, I think Mr. The doctor, professor, something like that, Anxious Masuka, he said that private players, they can import GMOs as a precautionary measure to curb this drought, in El Nino drought induced. But he said seeds cannot be imported because I'm sure you cannot replant the GMO seeds and all this stuff. But he said as a measure to just curb this issue that we have, they can import. Do we have alternatives if we are not going to do that with the situation that we have, that we don't have food, so we need something that is very drastic at the moment?
Allowing the importation of GMO to consumption and restricting the sale of GMO seeds to farmers is partial protection of the environment, but it also raises questions of consistency. We've got laws that do not allow consumption of GMOs, but we're allowing importers to bring in GMO foods. So it means, in short, that we're not abiding to the laws of this land. We do not have an SI to that effect. We just have ministers coming in the morning and saying, we are supposed to do this, people can do that. And the foods that are even coming, whether they're not even labeled. Like I said earlier on, it should be my choice as the consumer. Or I don't want to eat GMO. GMO maize is seen as a potential environmental risk and should not be, and its consumption should also be questioned. And let's not also forget that GMOs are less cheaper than organic foodstuffs. The more we open up our markets to GMO foodstuffs, we are closing, and people will no longer have anything to sell, especially those who produce for themselves. So there are also a lot of things that will be affected how GMO foods to come into our country. We should actually consider exploring alternative drought-resistant non-GMO crops and investing in sustainable farming techniques that can give us better and long-term solutions. That is my opinions. And besides that, this maize meal that we love so much is actually animal feed. It's not actually for human consumption. We should actually be exploring going back to our sorghum, rapoko, and millet A lot of people are suffering from diabetes, myself included, because of this maize meal. But I should consume that sadza. It's not healthy for us as African people.
So in short, you're like encouraging even farmers in Zimbabwe to go back to the sorghum and millet that we were studying in the 18th century and that stuff.
Yes,
Okay,
it's
okay.
actually healthier food. Very healthy.
Okay, so I'm still gonna ask this question again. Like, okay, you are a minister and you have drought and there is no food. What would you do? Because this is not, you don't need like long-term measures to like, let's plant sorghum a year before or something like that. You have this situation now, there's no food. What do you do?
There are always weather forecasts in place. The Minister of Agriculture and all subsidiaries should have made sure that they've got sufficient maize crops to feed the nation. They should have also explored the drought-resistant crops to ensure that Zimbabweans are well fed and that Zimbabwe is food secure. So this is not an excuse. When I see them actually exploring GMOs to come and feed the nation, it means they no longer care about this nation. The nation will eat the GMOs, they'll get sick, they'll go to hospitals which are not sufficiently equipped to deal with the cancerous diseases that they might get if they consume this food. And that is the reality. Yeah. What about the long-term effects? The long-term effects are actually hazardous and painful. Cancer in our words, I've seen a lot of people dying from cancer. Will Zimbabwe be able to manage millions of cancer cases in the event that maybe these GMOs have affected plenty of Zimbabweans? Those are the questions that we should be asking. And we cannot be defending such. What was the food security planning that they had in place? Because they knew that there was going to be El Nino. It's not like something that came yesterday with, we knew this 5-6 years ago that we were going to be having an El Nino-induced drought during these years. Other countries had prepared already on how they're going to feed their people.
Okay, so this is a
planning. That is not an excuse.
Thank you so much for that answer. So
Yes.
I'm going to go to this question because when I was reading about this issue, I heard that Zimbabwe was the first country to have a biotech degree in 1992. And the Zimbabwean National Biotechnology Authority Act of 2006 says clearly that all adoptions will be based on scientific research. Are you saying that the government is not following procedure in adopting this? And why do you say so? Because they say all adoptions will be based on scientific research.
Like I said, we've got a very big problem in our country of augmentation. Not only the biotechnology department that is lacking. We even have the medical, it's called the medical what? I've forgotten. The one that classifies drugs. We've been going up and down trying to get Mutoriro classified as a dangerous and illegal drug. For the past 5 years, we can't even get that done. Considering also the impact that Mutoriro has affected our youth. So we've got a lot of these authorities that are next to useless, that are just chowing taxpayers' funds for nothing. And I was actually shocked that Zimbabwe was one of the countries that introduced the biotech degree because we've got nothing to show for it. Zimbabwe's adoption of the biotech degree and the Zimbabwe National Biotech Authority of 2006 have not shown a commitment to scientific research and biotech innovation. We've not seen it. I don't know if anyone has, but personally, as Linda, I've not seen that. However, concerns arise over whether the government is fully transparent in decision-making processes regarding GMOs, because they flip-flop time and again. We don't know the actual government position when it comes to GMOs. What we just know is that GMOs are illegal and they're not allowed in Zimbabwe, but the next thing we hear importers being told that they can import GMO foods, which is a cause of concern, because they're not considering all scientific evidence, including potential negative impacts. And there is a due influence from powerful multinational corporates and the corporate companies in Zimbabwe. Advocacy for more transparency in the decision-making process could be the reason behind these concerns. We are not doing enough advocacy. Right now, we try and raise our voices to speak collectively as Zimbabweans. We're told, if you have shares in a particular company, don't come and gag activists who just want to protect the interests of every Zimbabwean who is being made to consume food that is not healthy for them.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm going to go to Rutendo's case because notice that in the same fight. So he recently was told not to comment on this stuff by, I think it's a court case in South Africa when he was having a case against INSCO. And I'm sure this is the same fight that you are fighting. So what are you doing differently not to go into the same judgment that that ended with him being given, this sentence, not to do this. What are you doing differently if you believe that there are powerful corporations and powerful corruption behind this?
To tell you the truth, I'm actually one people who gave Rutendo Matinyarare a supporting affidavit. We will not allow ourselves to be bullied by corporates who think that they're too powerful and that they can silence us, because we're concerned about the people of this country. It is said that our government does not support us. It is said that other political parties have come out guns blazing, actually attacking us. You saw, I think, the interview by Comrade Chris Muchangwa. And it is a cause of concern for us that the ruling party will not support us, will not allow foodstuffs to be investigated, to go to laboratories and to see if they contain glyphosate or not. And for me, I actually think that there's a lot of abuse that happened with Rutendo's case, because South Africa is not Zimbabwe. Rutendo is a Zimbabwean, challenging a Zimbabwean company. And why did INSCO go to a South African court to challenge Rutendo Matinyarare? That raises a lot of eyebrows. They went to South Africa because South African courts have got white people, and they are Greeks and white people, and they can manipulate each other in South Africa to have judgments that actually not make this matter go further. From my perspective and my understanding of the law, South African courts do not have a jurisdiction to be presiding over matters to do with a Zimbabwean citizen, a Zimbabwean company that does not even operate. Looking at it from that angle, you see that there's a lot of manipulation in place, a lot of money exchanging hands, and then we also have Comrade Christopher Mchangwa actually saying the learned judges in South Africa. Was he trying to say that we do not have learned judges in Zimbabwe who could have presided over the matter? Why did INSCO decide to go to South Africa? Because the food is being consumed in Zimbabwe and not in South Africa. So it raises a lot of eyeballs on what exactly is happening. Rutendo did not lose the case, the defamation case, because he appealed. Once a person appeals, it means that that judgment is not in effect. He appealed. He did not commit defamation. What Rutendo did on the 5th of early April this year, he took samples of Chibataura, Red Seal, and something, millimil, to a laboratory to go and test if it did not have GMOs and glyphosate. And the test came out positive. That is not defamation, because there's evidence to that effect, which was also filed in the court of law. What we're seeing here is corruption and ethical conduct in the South African courts and INSCO itself. Foodstuffs did not contain the glyphosate that we're talking about and the GMOs. Why didn't they also take their own foodstuffs to a court, to a laboratory, and come out with their results and say, this is what we're producing. There are no GMOs here. But they decided to come out guns blazing and start suing Rutendo for defamation. I'm ready as well to be sued for defamation if they think Rutendo didn't do that. He's got evidence. He said INSCO has GMOs and glyphosate, cancer-causing chemical, in its food. INSCO said he was lying, got a defamation order that said Rutendo must not tell lies about INSCO's food. Why didn't INSCO come with their own samples from their own laboratories and said, this is our sample from our labs, our food do not contain GMOs and glyphosate? For what we know right now, they're busy withdrawing some of their products from the shelves in the shops, maybe to bring in new products that do not contain the glyphosate, but we do not know where the products that they are removing are going to. Maybe they're going to be given to the less vulnerable, who will be affected as well by INSCO, and proved that they saw the proof with my own 2 eyes. So he wasn't lying. He could not have committed defamation. INSCO never at any one point. Wait, can I finish? And that is the question that we should all be asking. Saying, and then in conclusion, the court in South Africa have continued to say Rutendo has committed defamation by telling the truth. How can scientific tests and facts be defamation? Are the court saying Rutendo must not even comment about INSCO, even if it's true? That is unconstitutional in South Africa.
Okay, since we have the evidence now, can we have this case in Zimbabwe, run in Zimbabwe? Can somebody, since you say there is hardcore evidence, can we have now this case presided in Zimbabwe, like a new applicant? I don't know how these systems works and stuff.
INSCO is the applicant. They're the ones who can apply in Zimbabwe, because they're the ones who are saying people are lying against them. We just want proof that their food does not contain GMOs. If it does, they should just apologize to the people of Zimbabwe and make sure that they do better to the people of Zimbabwe, stop producing food with glyphosate and GMOs, and then we move forward. We're not fighting INSCO. We're not saying INSCO should close. What we just do not want are GMOs and glyphosate in the foodstuffs that they produce.
Okay, that is quite clear. Then I have this also question. When you talk about the people of Zimbabwe, I was looking at the people in Ghana, the youth in Ghana. I think they have held various demonstrations against GMOs at different intervals. But I'm thinking of ghetto youth, and he's not even thinking about all these things. What do you think the youth should know, and what should be done for also the people to advocate for themselves? Because it looks like there is a gap between those that are fighting for the people and the actual people that are consuming the food, because they seem like they are cool.
The biggest problem is they do not understand these things. There is just a disconnect about Zimbabweans that I sometimes do not understand. I remember in 2017, we tried to make noise about the dirty water that was coming out of the taps. We asked Zimbabweans to come, Hararians to be precise, to come to town hall so we would protest about the water. And I'll tell you that day we were less than 50. It is the same scenario again. The water that is coming out of the taps these days is stinking, it's what? But Zimbabweans are not moved by things that directly affect their livelihoods, that affect their lifestyles, that affect them at a personal level. Speak about a political personality, everyone will be interested. Speak about a socialite, everyone is interested. But my advice to Zimbabweans is we should be moved about things that affect, number one, our health, number one, our livelihoods, and number three, our quality of lifestyle. This issue of GMOs and glyphosate is a long-term issue that will affect our health, and we will die miserable and in pain from cancers. Pay attention. Start your own advocacy in your locality. Talk about it to people. Make people understand. Make people demand food to be labeled. Have a choice. Glyphosate.
Okay, thank you so much for this detailed explanation. Maybe lastly, I'm just going to ask on something. I mean, I have seen that this fight is not just a Zimbabwean fight. I've seen other countries like Kenya, like I said, Ghana, and other states that are advocating for GMOs not to be imposed on the people. But it seems like, the fight is against a very powerful cartel. And it looks like sometimes governments, they don't have a choice. Sometimes they may be forced to bend towards what those people want. What do you think they can do differently? Because sometimes I believe they might be cornered as well.
You're not wrong. Cartels always corner governments. They always control the economy and finances. And there is indeed an agenda, very powerful corporations in our country. And sometimes, between protecting its people and working with the corporate companies in Zimbabwe that are producing food. If they fail to strike a balance, the effects are going to be detrimental going into the future. And I'm afraid that the government itself will fail to contain the effects of these GMOs and glyphosate that is being consumed by ordinary Zimbabweans. So the government should actually establish stricter regulations and transparency about GMOs. They should also promote non-GMO sustainable agriculture through government incentives and research. The government must also engage in international cooperation to ensure that Zimbabwe has access to safe and affordable food that does not compromise the health of every Zimbabwean, and it will be able to have a healthy Zimbabwean and a healthy citizen, which is something that to have a healthy citizen.
Okay, that's quite interesting. That's quite interesting. Thank you so much, Lydia, for this insightful discussion. I'm sure I've learned one or two things, and also the other Zimbabweans that will be listening to this, they will also learn one or two things, and also some government officials that are gonna come through across this video. They will also get the messages. I'm sure everything is positive. We are not fighting each other, but we just want all of us to be in a better place where we are healthy, smiling, happy, and enjoying the benefits of our country. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Malik. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, I really appreciate it.